Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Rakshamam. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitang Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Trinadapi Sunichen Charadiva Sahishnuna Amani Namanadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Vikivalam. Kalo Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva Gatiranyata. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vas Hari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Please show me by your thumbs if everything sounds good. Okay, so we're picking up from where we left off last week, and the burning question that you had at the end of last week's program. Why did nobody know about this until 1 year later? Will be answered tonight. Let us begin. We have 3 sections tonight. This first section is called Lord Brahma Steals the Boys and Calves. Shukadeva Goswami was very much encouraged when Maharaj Parikshit asked him why the cowherder boys did not discuss the death of Aga Asura until after 1 year had passed. He explained like this: My dear king, you are making the subject matter of the transcendental pastimes of Krishna fresher by your inquisitiveness. Nitya Nava Navayamana. It is said that is the nature of a devotee to constantly apply his or her mind, energy, words, ears, etc., in hearing and chanting about Krishna. This is called Krishna consciousness. And for one who is rapt in hearing and chanting about Krishna, the subject matter never becomes hackneyed or old. That is the significance of transcendental subject matter in contrast to material subject matter. Material subject matter becomes stale, and one cannot hear a certain subject for a long time. One wants change. But as far as transcendental subject matter is concerned, it is called Nitya Nava Navayamana, which means one can go on chanting and hearing about Krishna and never feel tired, but instead remain fresh and eager to hear more and more. And so it is the duty of the spiritual master to disclose all confidential subject matter to the inquisitive and sincere disciple. Thus, Shukadeva Goswami began to explain why the killing of the Aga Asura was not discussed until 1 year had passed. Shukadeva Goswami told the king, "Now, hear from me of this secret with rapt attention." After saving his friends from the mouth of Aga Asura and killing that demon, Lord Krishna brought his friends to the bank of the Yamuna, addressing them as follows: "My dear friends, just see how this spot is very nice for taking lunch and playing on the soft sandy Yamuna bank. And you can see how the lotus flowers in the water are beautifully blown and how they distribute their fragrance all around. The chirping of the birds along with the cooing of the peacocks, surrounded by the whispering of the leaves in the trees, combine and present sound vibrations that echo one another. And all of this enriches the beautiful scenery created by the trees here. And so, my dear friends, let us have our lunch in this spot, because it is already late and we are feeling hungry. Let the calves remain near us and let them drink water from the Yamuna. While we engage in our lunch taking, the calves may also engage in eating the soft grass that is in this spot." Upon hearing this proposal from Krishna, all the boys became very glad and said, "Oh, certainly, let us all sit down here to take our lunch." The boys then let loose the calves to eat the soft grass. Sitting down on the ground and keeping Krishna in the center, they began to open their lunch boxes brought from home. Lord Sri Krishna was seated in the center of the circle, and all the boys kept their faces towards Krishna. They ate and constantly enjoyed seeing the Lord face to face. Krishna appeared to be the whirl of a lotus flower, and the boys surrounding Krishna appeared to be its different petals. The boys collected flowers, leaves of flowers, and the barks of trees, and placed their lunches upon them, as well as in their boxes, and they began to eat their lunch, keeping company with Krishna. While taking lunch, each boy began to manifest different kinds of relations with Krishna, and they enjoyed each other's company with joking words. While Lord Krishna was thus enjoying lunch with his friends, Krishna's flute was pushed within the belt of his cloth on his right side, and his bugle and cane were pushed in on the left side of his cloth. In Krishna's left palm, he was holding a lump of food prepared with yogurt, butter, rice, and pieces of fruit salad, which could be seen through his petal-like finger joints. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who accepts the results of all great sacrifices, was laughing and joking, enjoying lunch with his friends in Vrindavan. And thus the scene was being observed by the demigods up in heaven. And as for the boys, they were simply enjoying transcendental bliss in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At that time, the calves that were pasturing nearby entered into the deep forest, being allured by new grass, and they gradually went out of sight. So when the boys saw that the calves were not nearby, they became afraid for the calves' safety, and so they immediately cried out, "Krishna!" Because Krishna is the killer of fear personified. Everyone is afraid of fear personified, but fear personified is afraid of Krishna. So by crying out the word Krishna, the boys at once transcended the fearful situation. And out of his great affection, Krishna did not want his friends to give up their pleasing lunch engagement and go searching for the calves. Krishna therefore said, "My dear friends, you need not interrupt your lunch. Go on enjoying, for I am going personally to find the calves." Thus, Lord Krishna, still carrying the lump of yogurt and rice preparation in his left hand, immediately started to search out the calves in the caves and bushes. Krishna searched in the mountain holes and in the forest, but nowhere could Krishna find them. At that time, when Aga-asura was killed and the demigods were looking on the incident with great surprise, Lord Brahma, who was born of the lotus flower, growing out of the navel of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, also came to see. But Brahma was surprised how a little boy like Krishna could act so wonderfully. Although Brahma was informed that the little cowherder boy was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Brahma wanted to see more of the Lord's glorious pastimes, and thus Brahma stole all the calves and cowherder boys, taking them away to a different place. Lord Krishna, therefore, in spite of searching for the calves, could not find them, and Krishna even lost his boyfriends on the bank of the Yamuna, where they had been taking their lunch. In the form of a cowherder boy, Lord Krishna was very little in comparison to Lord Brahma. But because Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna could immediately understand that all the calves and boys had been stolen by Lord Brahma. Krishna then began to think, Brahma has taken away all the boys and calves. But how can I alone return to Vrindavan? The mothers will be aggrieved. Therefore, in order to satisfy the mothers of his friends, as well as to convince Lord Brahma of Krishna's supremacy, Krishna immediately expanded himself as all the cowherder boys and calves. In the Vedas, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has already expanded himself into so many living entities by his energy. Therefore, it was not very difficult for Krishna to expand himself again into so many boys and calves. Krishna expanded himself to become exactly like the boys, who were of all different features and facial and bodily construction, and who were all different in their clothing and ornaments and in their behavior in personal activities. In other words, each person, being an individual soul, has entirely different tastes, activities, and behavior. And yet, Krishna exactly expanded himself into all the different positions of the individual cowherder boys. Krishna also became the calves, who were also of different sizes, colors, activities, etc. This was possible because everything is an expansion of Krishna's energy. In the Vishnu Purana, it is said, Parasya Brahmana Shakti. Whatever we actually see in this cosmic manifestation, be it matter or the activities of the living entities, is simply an expansion of the energies of Krishna, just as heat and light are the different expansions of fire. Thus, expanding himself as the boys and calves in their individual capacities, and surrounded by all such expansions of himself, Krishna then entered the village of Vrindavan. The residents had no knowledge of what had happened. After entering the village of Vrindavan, all the calves entered their respective cowsheds, and the cowherder boys went to their respective mothers and homes. The mothers of the boys heard the vibration of their flutes before their entering, and just to receive them, the mothers came out of their homes and embraced their children. And out of maternal affection, milk was flowing from their breasts, and they allowed the boys to drink it. However, their offering was not exactly to their boys, but to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who had expanded himself to look like their boys. This was a chance for all the mothers of Vrindavan to feed the Supreme Personality of Godhead with their own milk. Therefore, not only did Lord Krishna give Yashoda the chance to feed him, but now, this time, Krishna gave the chance to all the elder gopis. All the boys dealt with their mothers as usual, and the mothers also, on the approach of evening, bathed their respective children, decorated them with tilak and ornaments, and gave them necessary food after the day's labor. The cows also, who were away in the pasturing ground, returned in the evening and called their respective calves. The calves immediately came to their mothers, and the mothers began to lick the bodies of the calves. These relations between the cows and the gopis with their calves and boys remained unchanged, although actually the original calves and boys were not there. Actually, the cows' affection for their calves and the elder gopis' affection for the boys causelessly increased. Their affection increased naturally, even though the calves and boys were not their real offspring. Although the cows and elderly gopis of Vrindavan had greater affection for Krishna than for their own offspring, after this incident, their affection for their offspring increased unlimitedly, exactly as it did for Krishna. For 1 year continuously, Krishna himself expanded as the calves and cowherder boys and was present in the pasturing ground. As it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanang Hrideshe Arjun Tishtati Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. Krishna's expansion is situated in everyone's heart as the Supersoul. So similarly, instead of expanding himself as the Supersoul, Krishna expanded himself as a portion of calves and cowherder boys for one continuous year. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now we go to part 2, which is entitled Balaram's Realization. One day, a few days before a year had passed, Krishna and Balaram were maintaining the calves in the forest when they saw some cows grazing on the top of Govardhan Hill. The cows saw down into the valley where the calves were being taken care of by the boys. Suddenly, upon sighting their calves, the cows began to run towards the calves. They leaped down Govardhan Hill with joint front and rear legs. The cows were so melted with affection for the calves that they did not care about the rough path from the Govardhan Hill down to the pasturing ground. They approached the calves with their milk bags full of milk, and they raised their tails upwards. While they were coming down Govardhan Hill, their milk bags were pouring milk on the ground out of intense maternal affection for the calves, although they were not really their own calves. These cows had their own calves, and the calves that were grazing beneath Govardhan Hill were larger, and they were not expected to drink milk directly from the milk bag, but were satisfied with grass. And yet, all the cows came immediately and began to lick their bodies, and the calves also began to suck milk from the milk bags. And there appeared to be a great bondage of affection between the cows and calves. When the cows were running down from atop Govardhan Hill, the men who were taking care of them tried to stop them. Older cows are taken care of by the men, and the calves are taken care of by the boys. And as far as possible, the calves are kept separate from the cows so that the calves do not drink all the available milk. Therefore, the men who were taking care of the cows on the top of Govardhan Hill tried to stop them, but they failed. Baffled by their failure, they were feeling ashamed and angry. They were very unhappy. But when they came down and saw their children taking care of the calves, all of a sudden the men became very affectionate toward the children. Indeed, it was most astonishing. Although the men came down disappointed, baffled, and angry, as soon as they saw their own children, their hearts melted with great affection. At once their anger, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness disappeared. They began to show paternal love for the children, and with great affection they lifted the children in their arms and embraced them. Then they began to smell their children's heads and enjoy their company with great happiness. After embracing their children, the men took the cows back to the top of Govardhan Hill. And along the way, they began to think of their children, and affectionate tears fell from their eyes. Now, when Balaram saw this extraordinary exchange of affection between the cows and their calves, and between the fathers and their children, when neither the calves nor the children needed so much care, Balaram began to wonder why this extraordinary thing had happened. Balaram was astonished to see all the residents of Vrindavan so affectionate to their own children, exactly as they had been to Krishna. And similarly, the cows had grown affectionate to their calves as much as to Krishna. Balaram therefore concluded that the extraordinary show of affection was something mystical, either performed by the demigods or by some powerful man. Otherwise, how could this wonderful change take place? Balaram concluded that this mystical change must have been caused by Krishna, whom Balaram considered his worshipable personality of Godhead. Balaram then began to think, this was arranged by Krishna, and I even could not check its mystic power. Thus, Balaram understood that all those cowherder boys and calves were only expansions of Krishna. Balaram inquired from Krishna about the actual situation. My dear Krishna, in the beginning, I thought that all these calves and cowherder boys were either great sages and saintly persons or else demigods. But at present, it appears that they are actually your expansions. They are all you. It seems you yourself are playing as the calves and boys. So what is the mystery of this situation? Where have all those other calves and boys gone? And why are you expanding yourself as the calves and boys? Will you kindly tell me what is the cause? And at the request of Balaram, Krishna briefly explained the whole situation. How the calves and boys were stolen by Lord Brahma, and how Krishna was concealing the incident by expanding himself so that nobody in Vrindavan would know that the original calves and boys were missing. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We have one more episode to do now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And this final episode is called Brahma Vimohana Leela. This is the bewilderment, Vimohana, the specific bewilderment pastime of Lord Brahma. While Krishna and Balaram were talking, Lord Brahma returned after a moment's interval according to the duration of his life. We have information of Lord Brahma's duration of life from the Bhagavad Gita. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Aharyad Brahmano Vidu Ratring Yuga Sahasrantang Teho Ratra Vido Jana. 1,000 times the duration of the 4 ages, Satya, Treta, Dwarpa, Kali, or 1,000 times 4,320,000 years, constitute Brahma's 12 hours. Similarly, one moment of Lord Brahma is equal to 1 year of our solar calculation. Just as time is relative, a year on earth is 1 day and night on the heavenly planets. And so 1 moment of Lord Brahma is 1 year on earth. So after 1 moment of Brahma's calculation, Brahma came back to see the fun caused by his stealing the boys and calves. But Brahma was also afraid that he was playing with fire. I have a song that I sometimes sing. Don't play with Maya, 'cause you're playing with fire. So Lord Brahma was playing with fire. How was that? Krishna was Brahma's master, and Brahma had played mischief for fun by taking away Krishna's cows and boys. Lord Brahma was really anxious, so he did not stay away very long. He came back after a moment of his calculation, which was 1 year on earth. Brahma saw that all the boys and calves were playing with Krishna in the same way as when he had come upon them, although Brahma was most confident that he had taken them and made them lie down asleep under the spell of his mystic power. Thus, Lord Brahma began to think, all the boys and calves were taken away by me, and I know that they are still sleeping. But how is it that a similar batch of boys and calves is playing with Krishna now? Is it that they are not influenced by my mystic power? Have they been playing continuously for 1 year with Krishna? Brahma tried to understand who they were and how they were uninfluenced by his mystic power. But Brahma could not ascertain it. In other words, Brahma himself came under the spell of his own mystic power, Brahma Vimohana Lila. The influence of Brahma's mystic power appeared like snow in darkness or a glowworm in the daytime. During the night's darkness, the glowworm can show some glittering power, and the snow piled up on the top of a hill or on the ground can shine during the daytime. But at night, the snow has no silver glitter, nor does the glowworm have any illuminating power during the daytime. Similarly, when the small mystic power exhibited by Brahma was put before the mystic power of Krishna, it was just like snow at night or a glowworm during the day. When a man of small mystic power wants to show potency in the presence of greater mystic power, he simply diminishes his own influence. He certainly does not increase it. So even such a great personality as Lord Brahma, when he wanted to show his mystic power before Krishna, he became ludicrous. Brahma thus became confused about his own mystic power. In order to convince Brahma that all those calves and boys were not the original ones, the calves and boys who were playing with Krishna transformed into Vishnu forms, as you see the picture behind me. Actually, the original boys and calves were actually sleeping under the spell of Brahma's mystic power. But the present ones, seen by Brahma, were all immediate expansions of Krishna or Vishnu. Vishnu is the expansion of Krishna. So those Vishnu forms now appeared before Brahma. All these Vishnu forms were of bluish color and dressed in yellow garments. All of them had 4 hands decorated with club, disc, lotus flower, and conch shell. On their heads were glittering gold helmets inlaid with jewels. They were bedecked with pearls and earrings, and they were garlanded with beautiful lotus flowers. On their chest was the mark of Srivatsa, the mark of the goddess of fortune. Their arms were decorated with armlets and other jewelry, and their necks were just like conch shells. Their legs were decorated with ankle bells, their waists with golden belts, and their fingers with jeweled rings. Brahma also saw that upon the whole body of each Lord Vishnu, beginning from the lotus feet up to the top of the head, fresh tulsi leaves and buds had been thrown. Another significant feature of these Vishnu forms was that all of them were looking transcendently beautiful. Their smiling resembled the moonshine, and their glancing resembled the early rising of the sun. And just by their glancing, they appeared to be the creators and maintainers of the modes of ignorance and passion. As it is, Vishnu represents the mode of goodness, Brahma represents the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva represents the mode of ignorance. Therefore, as the maintainer of everything in the cosmic manifestation, Vishnu is also the creator and maintainer of Brahma and Shiva. After this manifestation of Lord Vishnu, Brahma saw that many other Brahmas and Shivas and demigods and even insignificant living entities, down to the ants and very small straws, movable and immovable living entities, were dancing surrounding Lord Vishnu. Their dancing was accompanied by various kinds of music, and all of them were worshiping Lord Vishnu. Lord Brahma realized that all those Vishnu forms were complete in mystic power, beginning from anima perfection of becoming small like an atom, up to becoming infinite like the cosmic manifestation. All the mystic powers of Brahma, Shiva, all the demigods, as well as the 24 elements of cosmic manifestation, were fully represented in the person of Vishnu. By the influence of Lord Vishnu, all subordinate mystic powers were engaged in his worship. Vishnu was being worshipped by time, space, the cosmic manifestation, reformation, desire, activity, and the 3 qualities of material nature. Brahma also realized that Lord Vishnu is the reservoir of all truth, knowledge, and bliss. Vishnu is the combination of 3 transcendental features, namely eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And Vishnu is the object of worship by the followers of the Upanishads. Brahma also realized that all the different forms of boys and calves who were transformed into Vishnu forms were not transformed by a mysticism of the type that a yogi or demigod can display by specific powers invested in them. The cows and boys transformed into Vishnu Murtis or Vishnu forms were not displays of Vishnu Maya or Vishnu energy, but were actually Vishnu himself. The respective qualification of Vishnu and Vishnu Maya are just like fire and heat. In heat, there is the qualification of fire, namely warmth, and yet heat is not fire. So the manifestation of the Vishnu forms of the boys and calves were not like the heat, but rather the fire. They were all actually Vishnu. Factually, the qualification of Vishnu is full truth, full knowledge, and full bliss. Another example can be given with material objects which are reflected in many, many forms. For example, the sun is reflected in many water pots, but the reflections of the sun in the many pots are not actually the sun, for there is no actual heat or light from the suns in the pots, as they appear like the sun. But the forms which Krishna assumed were each and every one fully Vishnu. The specific word used in this connection is Satya Jnanananda. Satya means truth, Jnana, full knowledge, Ananta, unlimited, Ananda, full bliss. The transcendental forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are so great that the impersonalist followers of the Upanishads cannot reach the platform of knowledge to understand them. Instead, the transcendental forms of the Lord are far beyond the reach of the impersonalists, who can only understand through studying the Upanishads that the absolute truth is not matter or is not materially restricted. From Krishna's expansion into Vishnu forms, Lord Brahma could understand by his limited potency that everything movable and immovable within the cosmic manifestation is existing only due to the expansion of the energy of the Supreme Lord. And so, when Lord Brahma was thus standing, baffled in his limited power and conscious of his limited activities within the 11 senses, Brahma could realize that he himself was also a creation of the material energy, just like a puppet. As a puppet has no independent power to dance, but dances according to the direction of the puppet master, so the demigods and living entities are all subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we will continue this narration next week, because we are going to see next week what Lord Brahma does now that he has become bewildered by Krishna. So we will continue next week on this. Stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. Don't miss any episodes of Krishna-lila-sara. And now we will sing prayers of protection for the devotees. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlada Klada Dayane. Prahlada Klada Dayane. Hiranya Kashipur Vakshaha. Hiranya Kashipur Vakshaha. Shilatankanakalaye, Shilatankanakalaye, Ito Nrsinga Parato Nrsinga, Ito Nrsinga Parato Nrsinga, Yato Yato Yamitato Nrsinga, Yato Yato Yamitato Nrsinga, Bahi Nrsinga Hridaye Nrsinga, Bahi Nrsinga Hridaye Nrsinga, Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye, Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye, Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Sringam, Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringam, Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadish, Jai Jagadish, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jam Vishnupad Paramahansa, Paribrajacharya Stotra Sattasi Siman, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se koho Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gokupinath, Syamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Yamuna Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the Krishna book devotees. All glories to the Krishna book devotees. All glories to the Krishna book devotees. Om Tat Sat